Hot tub deliberations. Gonna try and make a video. To all of you who have taken the time to comment on my video uploads about objective morality, I just want to take a moment and just apologize. I really wish I had more time to respond to all the comments. I almost missed a very important one today where someone shared something very serious and deep and meaningful, and I'm glad I saw it because I didn't want to do that to anyone else who that may have happened to. I really apologize. There have been a lot of very thoughtful comments, and I'm just not able to respond to everything. And it's a little frustrating. I sort of go through these feelings like I should just drop the whole thing or drop any meaningful conversations because I can't engage the way I'd like to. But it is what it is, I guess. I mean, hopefully the dialogue is helpful to somebody somewhere. I know it's helpful to me, for sure. And so I really appreciate everything. A couple of comments I did want to respond to directly, just because I think they're important for clarification. And I hope everybody knows I am coming at this from a sincere position. I am on a quest. I challenge ideas, maybe not harshly, but forcefully sometimes because the rationality doesn't make sense to me. But I am coming at this with all sincerity, and I really appreciate GeoAngle for recognizing that. And to George had asked me what I mean by export, and he had hypothesized a couple of things about that, and I just want to clarify a couple of my terms here. And so when it comes to export, I've said, if morality is purely subjective, how do you export that? And what I mean by that is, how do you justify asserting that other people should act or believe the same way that you do when it comes to ethical issues? So George had asked, does you mean by force or by, sort of convincing? And of course, I guess you could do it by force, although that in itself may be unethical and probably ineffectual. But generally speaking, we do try to export our morality. We try to convince other people to believe the same as we do. That's what the culture war is all about. And that's where a lot of the problems are. We try to export it internationally and even within our own regions, right? And so, again, if morality is purely subjective, the question is, how do you justify convincing other people? On what grounds? That they believe subjectively they're as firm in their convictions as you are, and they believe for their own reasons. What should make the difference? What is the tipping point then when someone should see it your way? And so that's where I have an issue, of course, with the idea that morality is purely subjective. And to I guess, refine my position a little bit, I would say that I think that morality is objective facts plus, empirical observation plus reason. And by that I mean, correct reason, not reasoning something away, but reason that is very, very exacting, right, in the process. It becomes accurate reasoning that's like a math equation, right, where there really is almost ever only one true answer. That's my concept of morality, because we do use that, right? That's exactly how we come to our conclusions about ethics. We observe objective facts and we make some empirical observations about sometimes consequences, as Darren Kern has said. And then we reason those things out using whatever process we do, and we come to a conclusion. And I think in that way, morality can't be objective because it is, or subjective, because it is based on objective facts. And if we're using correct reasoning, we should be able to come to an accurate conclusion. And in that way, there's no sort of arbiter of morality. There's no pope of morality, pope of ethics. Because it's not based on anyone. Nobody holds the key. And so sometimes talking about a standard, a code of ethics is a little bit misleading, because it's not like it's written down on a stone tablet somewhere. What we're talking about are objective facts and empirical observations and reason to come to a conclusion. But it's not dependent on anyone. And I think that's why it's so critical that I hope that morality is not subjective and that it is objective and discoverable in this way, because then it doesn't depend on any given person's interpretation of it. If we can come to an accurate reasoning and our facts are right to begin with and our observations are right, we should be able to come to a correct conclusion and not rely on any particular expert or authority on ethics. That's my personal take on it. And I feel like purely subjective morality has no real meaning. George had also said something about you can absolutely reference something without referring to an outside scale or something like that. And I still don't, you may need to expand on that for me, because I'm not sure how one actually does that. If one says I am more moral than Hitler, what is the metric? We're more of something. There's a metric there. There's a scale that you can refer to that says, oh, more means more like this end of the scale, and less means over here. We're still referring to some sort of an external standard. And I forget the username, and I apologize. I've been engaged in a couple of comments with someone, a couple of guys, and so forgive me, but they were talking about, some of the lifeboat scenarios and how morality can't be absolute, and gave some various reasons for it. And some of them had to do with the way we view things in the lifeboat scenario, the moral conundrum scenarios, that you can't rule anything as absolutely immoral. That sort of leads you to inaction in that essence. And I would just say to that, I believe in comparative morality, right? So some things are a little bit less immoral than others, even if they are both immoral. Theft, I think, is somewhat less immoral than, say, rape. I mean, one is obviously a clearly very heinous, violating and violent act, and the other is a little bit less so, right? So I do believe that morality is comparative. And again, of course, when we're talking about the lifeboat scenarios, we're talking about no alternative, positive ethical option, right? So that makes things a little bit more difficult. But anyway, as I said, I really appreciate all the conversation that's taking place on those videos, and I really wish I had more time to devote to this subject, because it is, I think, important and interesting. One other thing, I think it was George that might have said that morality is not universal, that it's personal and societal, and we may have disagreements. And that's wherein I think lies the problem. This illuminates the issue of exporting for me. Because how do you really do that? How do you justify expressing to someone else that they should see it your way? And we do this, of course, by referring to objective facts and reason. That's how we do it. That's how it's done on the ground. And if you can't rely on that, and you can't say that you can come to some sort of a real-world conclusion, an objective conclusion about the ethics of a given thing, then I don't understand how we ever come to any kind of peace amongst each other in the public sphere. I don't understand how that ever happens. And when I say that morality is universal, I mean that it must apply to everyone equally, or it's really not very meaningful. It's got no real purpose. If someone has an exclusion because reasons, because of the color suit they're wearing or something like that, I think that people in government should be held to the same ethical standards, of course, as people on the street. Police should be held to the same ethical standards as people on the street, and that sort of thing. And when it comes to absolute, when I say I think that morality is absolute, I mean that it's not temporal. It's not something that changes over time. So, for instance, if we once, as a species, we're okay with slavery, and we're now, generally, at least as a species, not okay with slavery, the morality or the ethics of that act did not ever change. It's absolute. It's the same today as it was then. Our understanding is what changed. We used objective facts, plus empirical observation, plus reason to come to a conclusion. And Bod de Bits had talked a little bit about meat eating, and at one point we may find it abhorrent. Well, there are a lot of people who find it abhorrent today, and they do much the same thing. They use objective facts about the treatment of animals and maybe even our biological intake of meat and how that affects our bodies, and empirical observations about those things, and use reason to come to a conclusion. I'm not certain if their reason is valid, and I'm not sure that if they've got all their facts correct, but they've reached a certain conclusion. And if we do that at some point, I have to then wonder, was it immoral all along and our understanding changed, or is morality truly subjective in the deepest sense of the word, and it's really just whatever feels right at the time, which doesn't seem all that practical to me. It doesn't seem all that useful to us. We're really just expressing preference at that point, and it's kind of very much a dog-eat-dog scenario and will of the majority, which I don't think feels all that enlightened to me. It doesn't. If that's and of course, it doesn't matter what I like. What the facts on the ground are what they are. I recognize that, but much in the same way that I wouldn't be all that happy to find out that the Christian God is actually real and those are the rules and that's the plan. If I were to find out that that's truly the way morality is, I would accept it, but I wouldn't much like it. Anyway, thanks again, everyone, and have a good evening.